All right. Well, good day, folks, and welcome back to The Secret Solve. This is a program of The Secret, a book by Byron Price. What we do here is we look through the book The Secret, try to figure out what the author, artists, and other contributors were up to back. And so let's just get started on this particular episode and talk about page 193, 194, and 195, otherwise known as the corporate giants. So the corporate giants, also known as the Mens Insana Incorpore. Uh, Again, we're talking about the corporate giants. And so basically what I consider to be a guy standing on the Empire State Building. So if you go look at a film still from the movie Hong Kong, not Hong Kong, excuse me. If you go look at a film still from the movie King Kong, you will see this top of the Empire State Building actually looks like the image that was created here. We have an EPA flying around it with, something, and I'm starting to think that maybe Three Mile Island uh, is more important than I originally gave it credit for, especially since we have these EPA plans flying around here with something to throw over the top. If you go watch the original movie King Kong, you'll understand this image a little bit better. But let's look at the information that's presented here. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to identify the Houston Giants or the Dallas Giants. And if I have a little time at the end of this, I may try to figure out who they are. But let's look at the first giant mentioned. So they're talking about giant forebears and acts of veracity, rapaciousness, and in fact, every trait for which giants from Goliath to Andre. Well, most people probably don't know who Andre the Giant is, but I do because I grew up in the 1980s and I remember the whole wrestling thing. I remember Andre Rene Rousimov, who was a French, better known by his ring name Andre the Giant, a French professional wrestler and actor. He was a huge man, and so he was considered at one time the eighth wonder of the world. But I think the most important part that we must look at is that, here we have a French wrestler. He is specifically mentioned, Andre the Giant. And although he was born in France, so again, there's not going to be much in there. He finished school at age 14, and he didn't think education was necessary, and he joined the workforce. He did not drop out of school. A compulsory education in France at the time ended at 14. So he spent years working on his father's farm in Moulin, where, according to his brother Jacques, he could perform the work of three men. He completed, an apprenticeship in woodworking and next worked in a factory which manufactured engines for hay balers. Um, okay, none of this is probably terribly important. Okay, so he started out and had an early career. He taught professional wrestling, uh, or he was taught professionally wrestling, and then he went to the Japanese wrestling enterprises and wrestled in Japan. Then he became a touring special attraction. So in 1973, Vince McMahon, well, we met one McMahon earlier, but here's another McMahon. He founded the WWF. And the WWF then was famous for putting on these matches. And a lot of them were in New York's Madison Square Garden, in which he defeated Buddy Wolf in his first match. And so I'm going to fast forward here to he also had 6 minute time limit draws within the two major world champions of the day, Harley Race in Houston. In 1979, the Giant appeared, and in 1970, against Nick Brockwinkle in Chicago, the Giant appeared. And so the Giant was spotted there, as well as when he, in 1981, uh, He was disqualified for beating James Arthur Harris, ring name Kamala. And so, also in Knoxville, Ronnie Garvin is another of his opponents. So anyway, he made the thing. He also was in Quebec City, by the way. He lost to Don Leo Jonathan in Montreal in 1972. And so he has an illustrious career. But let's focus on a couple of the matches that were important. After WrestleMania, Razumov. Oh, okay, that's later. Sorry, so I can't include that, and I can't really include. Um, Man, some of these later matches are not probably. I can't just throw them in. But let's look at what we know about his wrestling career up until 1984. So, on November of 1981, at the Philadelphia Spectrum, he decisively defeated Khan in what was billed as the Mongolian stretcher match, in which the loser must be taken to the dressing room on a stretcher. The same type of match was also held in Toronto. And so the other famous match was when he took on twice um, the guy by the name of Don Heaton. So Don Heaton was also known as Don Leo Jonathan. He was an American and Canadian professional wrestler. He was also known as, I believe, the Montreal Giant. So, Leo, another Leo, I always like it when I run into a Leo, was born in Hurricane, Utah, and raised as a Mormon. His father was professional wrestler brother Jonathan D. Luan Heaton, a man known for bringing a pet rattlesnake named Cold Chills into the ring and reciting Bible verses as a wrestler, earning the name the Salt Lake Rattlesnake. He played high school football and learned martial arts. Jonathan was a sailor in the United States Navy. So we always love it when we find a sailor in this. He lived at the Vancouver, British Island since 1963, and he was married to a woman by the name of Rose. Everything's coming up roses, and I don't know why. Um, so anyway, his most famous matches were against Andre the Giant, and so his ring name was Don Leo Jonathan, the Mormon Giant, and Sonny Jonathan. So here they're working in on page 193 the wrestling giants, if you will, into the corporate giants, and they're doing it by telling you about Goliath to Andre, and so that's the information on Don Heaton. So Vincent James McMahon was the guy who basically promoted all of these uh, wrestling matches, if you will. And he was born in 1914 in Harlem, New York, to Rose Davis and Roderick James Jesse McMahon. So his father was a successful wrestling and concert promoter who had worked with legendary Madison Square Garden promoter Tex Rickard. Well, I wonder if Tex Rickard is the Houston and Dallas Giants. And so George Louis Tex Rickard was an American boxing promoter and founder of the New York Rangers of the National Hockey League and builder of the third incarnation of Madison Square Garden in New York during the 1920s. So he was the leading promoter of the day. So anyway, McMahon saw the tremendous potential for growth of pro wrestling and developed it. Uh, uh, so that's, I guess, McMahon. And I think the reason they're throwing McMahon in here and the wrestling in here is to tie up the earlier picture in the book of the football player McMahon, who was a Mormon. And so they're better tying that together for you here by showing you a Mormon wrestler. Uh, that's what I think they're doing. So the next thing that you need to look at the image of King Kong. And there's a movie poster that's on the wiki for we're looking at the 1933 film, by the way, of King Kong. And it's in New York Harbor. Filmmaker Carl Denham, known for wildlife films and remote and exotic locations, charters Captain somebody's ship, the Venture, uh, and often a corporate giant will be involved in a corporate venture for his new product. However, he is unable to secure an actress for a female role and had been reluctant to disclose searching the streets of New York City. He finds Ann Darrow and promises her an adventure of a lifetime. So the crew boards the Venture and sets off, during which the ship's first mate, Jack Driscoll, falls in love with Ann Denham. And anyway, they go off on an adventure, and you can read the plot of King Kong more if you should like to. But let's look at the actress that played the lead female character in King Kong, and who later in the movie is being held by King Kong on the top of the Empire State Building, because the original King Kong was the Empire State Building, and the King Kong is attached by 4 biplanes. Let's see. Let's count them. Let's count them in this image. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 in this image, and one of them has the EPA on it. I don't know what the significance of that really is. Okay, but we've now transitioned to King Kong and Fay Wray. Vina Fay Wray, born in 1907, is a Canadian-American actress best known for starring as Ann Darrow in the 1933 film King Kong. She had a 6-decade career, and she was one of the earliest scream queens. I know that these are women that basically are in movies for the purpose of looking hot and famous, and then calling out when attacked by a large being. Fay Wray was born on a ranch near Cardston, Alberta, to parents who were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. Oh my, we've got a reference to King Kong, and we've got a reference to another LDS. We've got a reference to Andre the Giant, who famously wrestled with a Canadian wrestler who was a Mormon. This all comes on the heels of the SALT talks, the 2 guys involved with the glitches, the lady involved with the typographical terrors, and now you're telling me that Fay Wray was a Mormon? Well, hell, I didn't know that, but I found it out today. So Alvina Marguerite, and maybe it's Marquette University, but anyway, Alvina Marguerite Jones, who was from Salt Lake City, Utah, and Joseph Heber Ray, who was from Kingston upon Hill, England. She was one of 6 children. And, oh, by the way, and was a granddaughter of LDS pioneer Daniel Webster Jones. Ooh, Daniel Webster Jones. And so there you have the Mormon history of Fay Wray, who was famously in the movie King Kong. So since we have Daniel Webster Jones mentioned here, he was the leader of the group that colonized what eventually became Mesa, Arizona, and it made the first translation of selections of the Book of the Mormon into Spanish, and he led the first missionary expedition somewhere uh, to the American Indians, and was leader of a group that heroically wintered at Devil's Gate during the rescue of the so at Devil's Gate, there was a rescue of stranded handcart companies in 1856. So maybe this is where we have the handcart, and this gets back to him. Jones was born in Boone's Lick, Howard County, Missouri. Orphaned at the age of 12, he joined a group of volunteers to fight in the Mexican-American War. So while camped along the Green River in 1850, his pistol went off in his holster, piercing through 14 inches of his groin and thigh. Damn, that was painful. His companions left him lame but alive. With a Mormon settlement in Provo, there he studied the Mormon doctrine, was baptized by Isaac Morley, and the next year he married Harriet Emily Colton, daughter of Philander and Polly Colton. After that, he married 15 other women. No, I just made that part up. So the Martin and Wallace White Handcart Company. Since we're mentioning handcarts, oh, why didn't that come out? Okay, well, anyway, the Mormons are famous for using these handcarts to carry their possessions as they migrated west. Okay, so on with the story. All right, let's see, where are we at? So Marion C. Cooper, Merian C. Cooper, he's the American filmmaker, aviator, actor, and producer, and he served in the United States Air Force and the Polish Air Force. His most famous work was the 1933 movie King Kong, and he is credited as co-inventor of the Cinerama film projection process. So here again, we're talking about another person who had a lantern that was lit by a lantern kind of deal, which is what a motion picture really is. So he was born in Jacksonville, Florida, to the lawyer John C. Cooper and the former Mary Caldwell. He was the youngest of three children. He wanted to be an explorer at age 6. He was educated at the Lawrenceville School in New Jersey and graduated in 1911. And I don't think this is the first person that's been educated at the Lawrenceville School that we've come across. After graduation, he received an appointment by the U.S. Naval Academy, but was expelled during his senior year for, quote, hell raising and for championing air power. God, you're in your senior year and you get kicked out? In the next years, he worked with the Des Moines Register and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Always like it when we circle back to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. So he went to the military aeronautics school in Atlanta. So he was in World War I, and he went to France, which goes along with the French theme here. He went to France. We had a French wrestler, etc. Cooper served as a DH-4 bomber pilot with the air during World War I. One of the planes that he was flying caught fire, and Cooper spun the plane to suck the flames out. He survived, although he suffered burns, injured his hands, and was presumed dead by the German officer who saw his plane landing and took him to a prisoner reserve hospital. Okay, so that kind of gets you a little bit of his history. Eventually, Cooper discussed with John Hamilton the plans for Pan American Airways, which was formed during 1927. Cooper was a member of the board on Pan Am. Pan Am famously has, and you may have seen the movie about Howard Hughes. Pan Am plays a role in Howard Hughes's eventual um, business in terms of putting that spruce goose in the air. So, in the corporate giant section, in the second section of the book, it mentions the following. So, giants' absurd attempts to squeeze whey from stones, their defenselessness against goose burglars, and their notorious inability to distinguish between a traveler they wish to club to death and a pile of pillows. Well, I think they're talking about the spruce goose here. Huh, you know, which the corporate giants couldn't figure out whether that was going to work or not. So Ernest Beaumont Schoedsack was an American motion picture cinematographer and director. He was a cameraman in World War One, where he served in the Signal Corps. Uh, at the conclusion of the war, he stayed in Europe to further his career. He worked on several films with Marion C. Cooper, including King Kong, Chang, a drama of the wilderness, and The Most Dangerous Game. So this guy was from Council Bluffs, Iowa, but he went to work in San Francisco as a surveyor, and so you get two Solve City ideas from this guy, plus the fact that he was an able aviator and a cameraman. And I think one of the Solve locations has to do with an aviator and a camera. So Willis H. O'Brien's claim to fame is the special effects for King Kong. And he was born in Oakland. He left home at the age of 11 to work on cattle ranches, and at 13 when he took a variety of jobs, including ranch hand, factory worker, fur trapper, cowboy, and bartender. Uh, so at the 1915 World's Fair, where some of his works were displayed, during this time he became a professional boxer, winning his first 9 bouts, but retiring after unsuccessful 10th. He subsequently worked for the railroad, first as a brakeman and then as a professional marble sculptor. So he had Thomas Edison was impressed by some of his works, but you can learn more about him because I don't think there's much more here except his association with the movie. We talked about Fay Ray. Up next is somebody that's the John Maynard Keynes. So it talks about the Keynes. What are they? The Keynes Kongs. Well, you had John Maynard Keynes, but you also had the economic ideas of John Maynard Keynes, and he was a first baron. And a baron of industry is a captain of industry, is somebody that's important to understanding economics. I slightly think that the image on page 195 might be John Maynard Keynes because the nose and the hair profile could be John Maynard Keynes, but then again, it could be one of the wrestlers. We'll go over some of the details in that one, but okay, so the whole Keynesian economics is the idea, I believe, that supply and demand dictate economic and that there's economic business cycles, etc. The interesting thing about Keynes is at the age of 5.5, Keynes started at the kindergarten of the Perse School for Girls for 5 mornings a week. He quickly showed a talent for arithmetic, but his health was poor, leading to several long absences. I thought John Maynard Keynes was a man, but he went to the Perse School for Boys, and then he went to Eton College, Cambridge, career, civil service. He went to a fellow of King's College. So this is probably the joke about, King Kong, if you will. World War I, Versailles Peace Conference experience. In the 20s, he wrote a number of different things. During the Depression, he tried to explain the Depression. He published the Means to Prosperity, which contains specific policy recommendations for tackling unemployment in a global recession. The multiplier effect is one of his ideas. Um, his magnus opus was the General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money, and it was published in 1936. Uh, if you want to get deep into the economics of this, you can. But although Keynes has been widely criticized, especially by members of the Chicago School of Economics, for advocating irresponsible government spending, financial buying. In fact, he was a firm believer in a balanced budget. So maybe that was where they're going with Keynes. So I don't know what the King Keynes is. I I I mean, you know that it's John Maynard Keynes, but you don't know what part of John Maynard Keynes's thing. There is this thing about the Zurich. So I ran into the gnomes of Zurich when I was researching the puzzle for Boston, and the gnomes of Zurich came up right there at Commercial Street. And maybe it's because maybe that street was named Zurich Street at one time in Boston, where the Pupilo Park is, and maybe that's it. I need to really get into this and see if there's a map of Boston that calls that section or that street uh, Zurich, and maybe that's where this one actually should be. So I'm just going to see if there's any relationships uh, with Keynes. Keynes' early romantic and sexual relationships were exclusively with men. I didn't know this guy was a flamer. Keynes had been in relationships at Eton and Cambridge. Significant among these early partners were uh, Dilly Knox. Dilly Knox. Oh, so now I understand why they added John Maynard Keynes to the story, because they wanted to give you another Knox. That's the reason they threw him in here, is because they wanted to circle you back to Dilly Knox. So Alfred Dilly Knox, CMG, was a British classic scholar and papyrologist at King's College, Cambridge, and a codebreaker. As a member of the Room 40 code-breaking unit, he helped decrypt the Zimmerman telegram, which brought... Oh, this is really kind of interesting. I need to read this further. I got to read Dilly Knox further. So he was the chief cryptographer. Knox played an important role in the Polish-French-British meetings on the eve of the Second World War. But in the First World War, he decrypted the Zimmerman telegram, and that was a secret diplomatic communication issued from the German Foreign Office in January of 1917 that proposed a military alliance between Germany and Mexico before World War I. So anyway, Dilly Knox, the fourth of six children, was son of Edmund Knox, tutor at Merton College and later Bishop of Manchester. He's the brother of E.V. Knox, a poet, Wilfred Knox, an English priest, and Ronald Knox, another priest. Oh, this is where we get into all the priests and the LDS. And so we introduce this guy, and now we have 5 priests. And Winifred Peck had a sister. The uncle of the novelist Penelope Fitzgerald, and his father was a descendant of John Arbuthnot, 8th Viscount of Arbuthnot, known as the Rich Lord. He built the bridge in front of the Arbuthnot House He was the first member of the family that considers spell his name Arbuthnot rather than Arbuthnot. Uh, okay, well, I think I found the connection that we needed to find, and that was the homosexual relationship with the Knox. That then again gives us Dilly Knox, and I think that's pretty much. I think that's it. That's why they threw John Maynard Keynes in here, was to tell us about Dilly Knox. Next up is Karl Marx. So Karl Marx, Marxian philosophy of, this guy's German, Hitler, all that stuff. Karl Marx, uh, he wrote on the Jewish question as a response by Karl Marx to then current debates over the Jewish question. Marx wrote in the piece in 1834 and was first published. Uh, and so he's got some Jewish connectivity. But I needed to get to his Mein. Is it not Mein Kampf? That's Hitler's book. What's his deal? His coup d'état was Das Kapital, which is the 3-volume set, and is directed at political economy, if you will. So Marx and von Westphalen had 7 children, but only 3 survived to adulthood. Nothing spectacular there, but this is the contrast. It gets you to the Marxianism. Next up is Ralph Nader, who's specifically mentioned in the book. So Nader, he is February 27th, 1934, born in Winston, Connecticut, to Rose Bozane. Everything's coming up roses. And Nathra Nader, both of whom were Antiochian Greek Orthodox Christians, immigrants from the Mount Lebanon and the Bega Valley in southern Lebanon. So we got some nice Greeks here, if you will. And he's obviously going to go to Harvard Law School. And after graduating Harvard, he served in the U.S. Army as a cook and was posted at Fort Dix. Fort Dix is in Trenton, New Jersey, by the way. New Jersey boy, or he gets to go to New Jersey and be at Fort Dix. He traveled to the Soviet Union and Cuba. We like that. He filed dispatches for the Christian Science Monitor, or the Monitor is a nonprofit news organization that publishes articles. It's a paper that has ties to the Church of Christ Scientists. So again, more of that relativity. So Nader's Raiders. So his book was his deal was to attack the corporate giants, just like the EPA, and his target was the General Motors Company, where he wrote a book called Unsafe at Any Speed. They attacked the more than 100 lawsuits that were pending against General Motors, Chevrolet Corvair, and there was also a Corvair plane, by the way. Anyway, and so he was basically Richard Nixon opened up the Federal Trade Commission as a result of Nader and some of his work. He was one of the leading anti-nuclear people in the 1970s with the project Critical Mass Energy. In 1974, he formed this and had over 200,000 supporters. His popularity led to a presidential campaign in 1972, and again in 1980, the Progressive-Oriented Citizens Party approached Nader with the prospect of running for president. Nader declined this offer, though, stating, "I will never run for president." The party ended up nominating Barry Commoner instead. Well, this 1980 proclamation in 1982 could have been successfully true, but again, Nader, the secret predicts the future because Nader ran for presidency in 92 and 96. And he became the Green Party candidate in 1996. Okay, so again, information that happened after the book was published is just added to the show for entertainment purposes. You know, it's just for fun to throw it out there. Anyway, so he ran with Winona LaDuke in 2000 for president. He ended up raising $8.4 million, and he actually got 2.74 as a Green Party candidate. Ralph Nader in the 2000 campaign got 2.74% of the vote. Again, this obviously all appeared afterwards, but that was a substantial better than he did in 2004 when he only got 463,000 votes. Okay, next up, Jack the Giant Killer is specifically mentioned in this article here where it says he will discover that in his sleep he has been looted by Jack the Giant Killer. Jack the Giant Killer was a heroic fantasy adventure starring Kevin Matthews in a fairy tale story about a young man who defends a princess against a sorcerer. So this is where it uses stop motion animation. And I told you that these guys that created The Secret were into this kind of stuff. Animation, especially Overton Lloyd, was starting to use computers to do computer animated series and stuff like that. But in the plot, the Duchy of Cornwall, another Cornwall, of fairy tale days, a sorcerer named Pendragon rules over giants, witches, and hobgoblins. And so I don't think there's much to be gotten out of this other than the fascination with stop animation. And, perhaps Kerwin Matthews was the American actor best known for playing in The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Three Worlds of Gulliver, and Jack the Giant Killer. Matthews was born in Seattle, Washington, but he was only 2 years old when his mother divorced and they moved to Janesville, Wisconsin, where he attended Janesville High School. After serving, he went to the United States Forces and he became a pilot and a swimming instructor. He then did some more work for the Pasadena Playhouse, including a production of Comedy of Error. Well, the glitches would have some fun with that one. Okay, so he was basically a freelance. He then went to France. He then went to France, and he played Johann Strauss Jr. in the Disney two-part telefilm The Waltz King. Again, these movie roles always seemed up having some sort of great, strange connection. But Judy Meredith was the co-star. And so here we have, unfortunately, one actor from Portland, which is Judy Meredith, and the other one from Seattle, Washington. And I can't decide which is a better candidate for a Saul, Portland or Seattle. So here we go, give me mixed signals again. I mean, we had all this information about the Jobses and Atari and some of those people, and now I'm getting circled back. I don't know. I do like, I've circled and found George Burns on a number of occasions, and uh, the Pasadena Playhouse uh, thing was something that George Burns is associated with. So I don't know, Portland, Oregon. She died in Las Vegas, which doesn't help me any at all because sometimes I think there's a possible solve in Las Vegas. So I don't really want to throw her in there. But since that movie was mentioned, I had to look at her. The Mysterious Island is the third of these, which has to do with blinded by the crafty Ulysses uh, in this nadir castration deal. Oh, castration. Remember that guy who shot himself in the nut sack? Maybe that was funnier and more intentional than I realized. Because he castrated Ralph Nader, but the other guy shot himself in the nutsack. And I don't remember which guy that was. I think he was one of the Mormons, maybe. God, having multiple wives and shooting yourself in the nutsack, that could be problems. Okay, so The Mysterious Island is a 1905 film, otherwise known as Calypso's Island, sometimes advertised as Ulysses or Odysseus and the Giant Polyphemus. It's a French short film, and that gets you to that George. I guess if you look that up, you get to find out about George Marie George Jean Méliès, uh, who was the French illusionist and actor and film director associated with this film. And I don't think you get much out of this except here's Louis and he's from France. Another Louis from France, but I don't know where that takes you, honestly. And so I'm not gonna spend much time on him. He was kind of mentioned in passing. Uh, so he did make it to New York, by the way. He was at the coronation of Edward the Seventh, or that was one of his productions. His a major production was uh, The Impossible Voyage. He did do another book or another film called Under the Seas. He did another one called The Impossible Voyage. In 1912, this guy most notably put out the film The Conquest of the Pole, Giant Step. And this was inspired by such contemporary events as Robert Peary's Expedition of the North Pole and Ronald Amundsen's Expedition of the South Pole. And I've always thought that there's been several mentions of Robert Peary. And, again, Robert Edwin Peary Sr. is the American explorer, an officer in the U.S. States Navy who made several expeditions to the Arctic in the late 19th and 20th centuries. So over here in the next section, it talks about Greek mythology and the frost giants, menacing, promiscuous, and socialistic methodologies, characters of the old Scandinavians, and doing well in the rug trade in ancient Persia. I haven't quite figured out the rug trade in ancient Persia, but this might be the frost. So the guy that I think is in Greek mythology, they are mentioned as shipping tycoons who wrecked the Titanic. And here we have another reference to the Titanic and ice. And we all know that the ship that went and brought I think some of the survivors from the Titanic ended up, anyway, or maybe that was the Lusitania. I don't know. Shipwreck survivors. But this guy is in no way a shipwreck survivor. This man is truly a giant, a captain, one of the corporate giants, and his name is Aristotle Onassis. Aristotle Socrates Onassis is who we're talking about. He's Greek. he amassed the world's largest shipping empire and was one of the world's richest and most famous men. He was married to the daughter of another shipping tycoon, and he was had a long-standing affair with an opera singer, Maria Callas, and was married to Jackie Kennedy, the widow of the United States President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. So in the back of the book, where they are mentioned as a shipping tycoon, I wonder if indeed they are talking about Aristotle Onassis. Okay, so we know he's Greek. We know he has some ties in the shipping business, freighters and tankers. Uh, so, in 1970, it was still, in 1970, the SS Arrow ran aground and spilled into the Paducah Bay, Nova Scotia. It was a significant oil spill of Canada's east coast. About 25% of the amount spilled by the Exxon Valdez in Alaska in 1989. So the Valdez hadn't happened, but I was so ready to go there. He had ties to Monaco, Saudi Arabia, whaling. It's always nice when you find somebody that likes whales, because I swear I see whales in these images, and so many of these people originate from Wales. I hope I harpooned that point and put it out there for you. So not sure what years he was in the whale. Between 1950 and 56, he was in the whaling business, but he did sell off the whaling business. He opened Olympic Airlines, Project Omega. In 1968 was a Greek military junta, and shortly after his marriage to Jackie Kennedy, Onassis announced a launch of Project Omega, a $400 million investment program aimed to build considerable industrial infrastructure in Greece, including an oil refinery. Onassis had cultivated Greek junta director Georgios Papadopoulos. Well, that sounds Greek. So he has all these relationships, Jackie Kennedy, etc. I think I think the most important part about the quote unquote shipping tycoon is that he married John Kennedy's wife, or yeah, John Fitzgerald Kennedy's wife. I didn't find much on this thing called the Jotun. This is the Greek mythological old Scandinavian frost giant. But frost giant referred me to this. But the thing I think that they're trying to point out is the stone. So the frost giant is basically has the thing called this picture stone, and it's believed to depict the Geiger riding on a wolf with vipers as reins, which has been proposed to be Hurricane. So I think they're just trying to get to the Greek stones and explain the stones in the image, so that you have an explanation for the stones in the image that some people think are Milwaukee, but I'm pretty sure it's Salt Lake based upon what I've just presented the last couple days. So fee fi fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread. Well, this is the first line from a quatrain in the English fairy tale Jack and the Beanstalk, which, you know, the Jack and the Beanstalk uh, is given in it's given in Joseph Jacobs' rendition, and he was born at New South Wales. He's a Jewish folklorist. So again, fee fi fo fum. Other no printed versions of Jack the Giant Killer appear in the History of Jack and the Giant, and later versions are found in chapbooks. Uh, I'm not sure what the relevance of this one here is, except maybe Beanstalk. Because I didn't get much when I looked at Joseph Jacobs. Because Joseph Jacobs, was South Wales, English folklore, Sydney, Jewish family, um, University of Cambridge. Uh, he went to the Royal Academy. Um, Later life, he was. Oh, so Jacobs visited the United States to deliver lectures on the philosophy of Jewish history at Gratz College in Philadelphia, as well as groups of the Council of Jewish Women in New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago. Well, those cities all sound fairly familiar. So he died at his home in Yonkers, New York at age 62. Uh, okay, who's next? Google's next. American Express is next. And I don't know why I'm going to tell you about American Express, other than to say that I just kind of felt that they were part of the corporate giants. So in 1850, American Express was started as an express mail business in Buffalo, New York. It was founded as a joint stock corporation by the merger of the express companies owned by Henry Wells and William G. Fargo and John Baron Butterfield, otherwise known as the Wells Butterfield Company. Um, and by the American Express Company purchased Vesey Street in New York, a site for its stables, Hudson River Railroad. It expanded nationally, did this railroad express business. And by the time we were into the 1980s, um, uh, the gold card had been introduced in 1966, and they formed a venture with Warner Communications in 1979 called Warner Amex Satellite Entertainment, which created MTV, Nickelodeon, and the Movie Channel. So I don't, the Shearson Lehman Hutton is basically a financial firm, and they in the mid 1981 it purchased Sanford J. Wells Shearson Lee Broads and uh, the second largest securities firm in the United States to form Shearson American Express. Uh, and so this in 1980-81 would have probably been the largest investment firm in the country. Now, I don't know how far along the Oracle of Omaha, Berkshire Hathaway, had gotten at this point, but this is the second largest security firm in the United States with this merger in 1981. So it's got to be one of the corporate giants, I guess, in my humble opinion. And the rest of that really doesn't matter because it happened afterwards. The other thing that I got the feeling out of this story would be maybe the strength of Gibraltar, the get a piece of the rock, which we always say get a piece of the rock for Rock Hudson. The maddest people in Hollywood are the last ones to get a piece of the rock. Rock Hudson. You'll have to do a little research to figure that one out. So this was started in Newark, New Jersey in 1875. It was originally called the Widows and Orphans Friendly Society, then the Prudential Friendly Society. It was founded by John F. Dryden, who later became a U.S. Senator. The company sold only one product. The only one product that they sold to begin with was burial insurance. How many people in The Secret, in the back of the book, could have benefited from burial insurance? Okay, so acquisitions. In 1981, the company acquired Bash & Co., a stock brokerage service that operated as a wholly owned subsidiary. Um, And so uh, it's another New York-based brokerage firm. So the reason I brought this one up is because of John F. Dryden. John Fairfield Dryden uh, was the founder of Prudential Insurance and U.S. Senator from New Jersey. And I got the feeling that they wanted somebody that was very wealthy, was a tycoon of industry, and then become a politician. And this is the guy I came up with. I don't know why. So Dryden was married to Cynthia Jennings Fairchild, and they had some children. Uh, his estate was valued at $50 million. In addition to his home in Bernardsville, New York, Dryden was in the process of constructing a home in High Point, New Jersey, that was to be one of the largest homes in the country. That would be a giant home. His daughter Susan used part of the Prudential fortune to donate uh, acreage to the State Park of New Jersey's highest point. John Dryden Cooser, Dryden's grandson, was a state senator and Brooke Astor's first husband. Well, no story about captains of industry could not include John Jacob Astor, right? Uh, so John uh, Jacob Astor, if you go back far enough uh, to the corporate giants, the Hudson Bay Company certainly would be relative or relevant to um, the story of people who amassed enormous wealth in this country. But John Jacob Astor the Fourth. Again, we're talking about Rhinecliff, New York. We're talking about uh, the uh, the Astors. Uh, Astor attended St. Paul's School in Concord, New Hampshire. He later attended Harvard, of course. He went by the name Jack, an ungainly appearance and a perception that he was an aimless dilettante led one newspaper to give him the name Jack Astor with two S's. Oh my! All right, so among Astor's accomplishments was a journey to other worlds in 1894, a science fiction novel about a life in the year 2000 on the planets Saturn and Jupiter. He also patented several things, including a bicycle brake. Well, a brake would have been handy on the calculus. A vibrator disintegrator used to produce gas from peat moss. Oh, they're talking about doing that today. And a pneumatic road improver, and he helped develop a turbine engine. Well, gee, did we look at all that stuff earlier about turbine engines and rocketry and propulsion and all that stuff? Uh, so in May of 1898, Astor was appointed to a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Volunteers and served as an officer on the staff of Major General William Schaefer in Cuba during the Santiago campaign. Always like when we run to somebody with Cuba. On February 17th, 1891, Astor married socialite Ava Lowy Willing, a daughter of Edward Shippen Willing and Alice Barton. The couple had two children. Thank God he knocked her up and got those babies out fast because. So in this article, it says something about a titanic monopoly. Well, certainly John Jacob Astor was accused of having a monopoly at one time or another. And certainly his wealth was enormous. But over time uh, and detail, John Jacob Astor the Fourth was an unreal real estate investor, and he died in the sinking of the RMS Titanic during the early hours of April 15th, 1912. Astor was the richest passenger aboard the RMS Titanic and was thought to be among the richest people in the world at the time, with a net worth of roughly 87 million when he died, equivalent to $2.44 billion in 2021. Now, with the Biden administration, he's probably down to a little under 2 million because of everything Biden's caused us. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up right there with the corporate giant. The corporate giant who was wrecked, the Titanic monopoly. And when they're talking about the rug business, the rug trade, I'm not so sure they're just not talking about the fur rug, you know. But if you can help me out and tell me who the rug trade from ancient Persia is, it would be helpful in solving another puzzle, probably. All right, folks. Well, that's going to wrap this presentation up. No, it's not going to wrap it up because if you look at the image itself, I think you've got the deer and you've got the squirrel, you've got the rocky appearance. And I think this may have a little bit to do with the image matching another image. And so you're supposed to use some information from this one, in order to perhaps look at another puzzle. But I've already mentioned the Mormon connection, but I think there's one other in here. I mentioned the Greek connection, Onassis, but I think there's one other that I'm not getting out of this, and I really wish I could figure out what it was. But anyway. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining in. No visitors to the room, so I apologize for the hour. I just keep going when I find information I think is relevant, and I apologize for that. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining me on this presentation of The Secret Solve. I will be back at another time to talk about the toll trolls, where one of them is holding a Y that looks very similar to the V at one. Take one thing of the V. Ooh, I think I don't know. I think I may have solved another puzzle. All right, folks. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. End stream. Oh no! Cancel end stream. No, cancel end stream. End.